you know what kind of tag game that you want to run, who's coming, how much time it's going to take, and it's time to set up your game table. Now, especially if you're tight on time and you're trying to create a really focused experience for players, it can be good to get it all laid out in advance for players so that they can come, sit down, and ready to play the game. The less they feel like they're learning how to play with you, the more they'll be able to be comfortable and just be present to the story that they want to tell. I like to think about the game components in terms of big sections. So in the middle, we've got the board. And the board plays an important role because it creates the space of the game world. When things are on the board, they're happening in the game. And when things are off the board, they're only possibly going to happen. And on the board in particular is the maps. You can organize the maps on the board in the right order before the game. So you know you start with the base map and the shocks are going to come out one by one. So you can put them in the right order. Then you put the piece of plastic on top of that because the player tokens will go on top of the piece of plastic. And that allows you to change the maps out underneath without moving the tokens. Also on the board is the community resilience track, which you'll be adjusting throughout the game with the pink heart token that goes on it in order to track where resilience is. That starts at the third dot from the left. And you want that close to you because that means the board is right side up, more or less, for the players, and it's easy for you to adjust it. Also on the board are two places where the round order of the game is summarized, so players can quickly reference that. And at the bottom of the board is the programs track. So this is another major section of the game that sort of spills off the board. We'll talk more about programs later, but all of the possible programs mostly start off the board, where it signifies that they're just ideas. And then as players decide to advance, then they move on to the board. And you may decide that at the beginning of the game, you want to have one program that's already in the pre-launch phase on the board. So you can put that there to start with. Next is your facilitator materials. So you've got things that players shouldn't see until it's time for them to see them. For example, the news cards. You might lay those out along the top of the board, face down with the big numbers on the front face up. This gives players a sense of the progression that they're about to move through. Some people really like to get a little bit of a sense of where we're going and how's this all going to work. You also have the shock materials. So earlier we said we already were hiding our shock maps underneath the base map, but you've also got the shock briefs, the cards that have the information about the shock on them. Those deliberately only have numbers on the front so that if players do see them face down, they won't know. And on the back, it explains the details of the shock scenario, 2 or 3 of those. And then you'll also have trouble cards. So for each shock, there'll be a deck of 15 cards, each with a mini scenario on them that players will deal with during the shock phase. Those do say the name of the shock on the back, so you might want to make sure that those are hidden from the players. Sometimes I put the shock brief card on top of those so players can't see them. So have all those things ready to hand along with your facilitator guide. The next big zone are the player kits. Each player has the same bundle of items that they'll be working with throughout the game. Now, the big thing is the character sheet. So everyone gets one of those, and they'll need a pencil to write on that with. They also need their tokens. They get 2 heart tokens and 1 house token in their color. One of those heart tokens is used to track the well-being track, and the other 2 will be used during character creation to put onto the map. They also have their own personal deck of energy commitment cards, which also are energy cards on the back. So one side is different icons, and on the other side of each card will be a lightning bolt symbol. They play 2 roles throughout the game. During character creation, they'll focus as energy commitment cards, and for the rest of the game, they'll focus as just unspecified plain old energy cards. The next big thing that players have is adaptation cards. Now, these cards are double-sided, but that's mainly just to extend their life. We'll only use one side during the game. These are those green cards that say adaptation on the top. And these have a white blank space because they can be written on with the dry erase markers that are provided, erased, and reused. Related to the adaptation cards is the adaptation guide. The adaptation guide is just information, not really a game piece, but it provides players prompts to help them think about adaptations they could do. So each player should have one or have access to be able to easily read one if they need to. That covers all of the player components. I like to lay out all of the components in a nice way for each player, so there's clearly a zone they can sit down at when it's time to join the game.